Peter, Sir Francis Bacon is known in the modern world as being a philosopher, but he's also called a poet by many of his friends, and we don't really see any examples of his poetry around. Tell me about that.
No, that's right. We don't see examples because he was called a secret poet. He himself calls himself a secret poet. But as soon as he died, the wonderful tributes came out about him as being the greatest poet of them all.
Which is a massive tribute.
And who wrote comedies and tragedies. Those are stage plays.
Yeah.
But and they were so good that it renovated the whole of philosophy, they said, in these tributes. Well, they must have been pretty powerful.
It must be amazing. Where are they?
Wonderful plays. So where are they?
Yeah.
Well, we also know he used pseudonyms. And he was even going to give a pseudonym to his philosophical work at one time, Hermes Stella. But then he decided against that. If he'd done that, we wouldn't even know he wrote all that philosophy.
Yes. So there's a lot about him that's still hidden.
Yeah. So we know his plays that he's written and other sorts of poetry don't have his name to it. And may have somebody else's name to it or a pseudonym. But certainly don't have Francis Bacon written on them. So that's a treasure hunt in itself.
It is.
Because poetry was so important to him. He actually said several times in his letters that we have preserved that his real heart was into in the land of the muses with poetry and the artistic world, which also includes philosophy. Philosophy always was seen to include all the arts.
Yes. Yeah.
So where is his poetry? Well, I think a clue is that the old saying, Minerva teaches people through entertainment.
Yes.
And he certainly must have used that, because he mentions that several times. He also mentions the treasure hunt several times as being important methods. And in his design of his philosophy, he talks about the history to build up, then the philosophy, but to get from history to philosophy, there needs to be poetry. Poetry raises the history to the mind as it might be seen, considered.
So it's like raising consciousness.
Raising consciousness.
Yeah.
Seeing things and thinking about it in imaginative ways.
Yes.
And he said a lot about imagination. He likened that to the Roman god Janus, the primary god of all.
Yes.
Who's the gatekeeper of the mysteries and can open our mind up to heaven, to the heavenly mysteries. And he saw imagination not just as imagining something in a simple way, but something that could serve us in an even greater way, such that we can create through imagination. And so he said that's something we need to know. How does it work? What does it do? Because it's a very, very powerful gift that we've all been given.
Yes.
And we need to learn it and use it very carefully.
And actually quite the opposite goes on. We seem to nowadays be trying to close down children's imagination a lot of the time and get them all to think in sort of straight lines, as it were, rather than expanding open.
Well, it certainly does when it comes to the spiritual world.
Yeah.
I remember being at school when, I've been able to see angels. I still see angels very clearly. They're very real to me. I absolutely believe in them. They've been my teachers and are my teachers. But I had friends around me at school who could also see the same, and somebody at school told them, "Oh, don't be so silly," because he talked about it.
Yeah.
And the teacher said, "Oh, don't be so silly, it's just your imagination."
Yes, it's dismissive.
Dismissive. Well, she was right about one thing, wrong about the other.
Yeah.
Because imagination, that's the key.
Yes.
But it has to be trained. And you do have to discern, is it a fantasy I'm seeing, or is this a real thing I'm seeing? And that means you have to test it out.
Yes.
So that's how he saw his philosophy working. You use the imagination to get these insights of all the worlds, natural, human and spiritual. But they must test it out.
So you need discrimination as well.
Discrimination.
Yeah.
And when you get better at it, because you do get better at it, and you know what's to trust, what's working well and what isn't working well, you can recognise the fantasies from the things that are real.
Yeah.
You get better at that. And then things become quite powerful. And in some, well, from my experience, you find the spiritual world actually can work with you.
Yeah.
Because you've linked with them. They always want to work with you.
Yes.
But we've got to make that link.
Yeah.
And we can only do it through love too. That's the key to it. So going back to his plays, well, with his philosophy, he saw like we have laboratories and so on,
Yes.
as the way to look at the natural laws. But when it comes to human laws and spiritual laws, we need something different. So poetry in a different way. And we know that he was involved at Gray's Inn with producing the big entertainments with masques and plays involved in that, and dancing, music and so on. But they were always written as a team. There was one person who was responsible for the whole concept and probably the main writing.
Like the Master of the Revels.
Master of the Revels,
yeah.
And so there's always a key person, but he had a team of people helping him.
Yeah.
And we also know that's how Bacon worked with other things too, where he's writing entertaining things. We're not told what they are.
So we know he does it, but we don't know what they are.
Yeah, well, we do know that a few of the things that Gray's Inn that he was involved with and was key to, both in his earlier life and his later life. One very important one was the famous Gray's Inn Revels of 1594, which went over the winter New Year time, 12 days of Christmas. And it had to be special because Gray's Inn wanted to bring back its good name on this, because there had been a 3-year abeyance of the Revels because of the illnesses around. And so they wanted to recover their good name, and they asked, it's in writing, they deliberately asked Francis Bacon to redeem their good name, and he was put in charge of it.
So he was a bit like the sort of Steven Spielberg of his day, possibly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he put on the Revels to do working from the errors of humanity and how to and the troubles that bring about, the chaos and so on, and the troubles, and then how to redeem that. And so it went through different grand nights and so on, in which were plays. And the first grand night they had Comedy of Errors acted, the Shakespeare play Comedy of Errors, but it was acted by the Gray's Inn people, because they had their own team of actors. And that was the whole point, you're learning how to be a barrister and how to perform in court, but also take part in the Queen's Court, which loved entertainment. So you had to be good at all this. So you acted the parts yourselves if you're a member of Gray's Inn. You didn't bring in, well, sometimes they brought in an outside company, but not that day, because Shakespeare's company, so-called Shakespeare's company, was acting for the Queen, so they couldn't have been at Gray's Inn. So they put on Comedy of Errors, and the whole night sort of ended in confusion, it's said. And the Templars, the inner temple, had been invited, and they sort of had to leave in feigning disgust, It was all set up, because they were doing it jointly with the Templars. The whole thing was designed to go with them. So they obviously discussed it together. And then the sorcerer was then put on trial the next day, had a mock trial, and said, why has this gone wrong, and so on. And he redeemed himself, but then said, I'll redeem the whole thing with a special next thing that comes on. So the next grand night was what's called the Knights of the Helmet put on. And to these grand nights were invited all the bigwigs of society. The Lord Chancellor and all the other ones. And so it was quite an event. And the Knights of the Helmet were produced, which really was introducing Bacon's scheme, philosophical scheme for everything. And the Knights of the Helmet come from the idea the helmet is Pallas Athena's helmet, the goddess of wisdom. And when you wear it, it's a sign of wisdom. She gives it to you like the the laurels you have, like a poet has. You have the helmet saying, well done, my knight, my hero. And it's a reward representing the wisdom you put into action and the illumination you have, but also it gives you invisibility, it's said. So they're known as the Invisible Ones, which is the name of the Rosicrucian Society. So they get a key. Where were the real historical Rosicrucians? That's where they were in England at that time. And the idea of also the helmet, it's known as the strong helmet, which gives you clear sight, clear perception, discipline and so on. And the German word for that, helmet of strength, is Wilhelm, from which you get William. So you've got Pallas Athena there, who's the Shakespeare,
Shaker of the Spear.
Shaker of the Spear, and the William Shakespeare, Knight of the Helmet. You know, it's a wonderful description.
Yes, you put the clues together, and we can see where Francis Bacon.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was a leader of the poets.
Yes.
They worked together as a team, but he was the key one. He was their Apollo. They called him their Apollo, or Athena, even they called him.
So a truly amazing man.
Amazing man.
Yes.
Yeah, Ben Johnson said a man like that only comes once in an age,
Yes.
if that. You know, quite something.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.